She refused to become queen, but her family insisted so much that Jane, for the third time, finally agreed. Through her, the Grey and Dudley families hoped to take control of England, and no one wanted to let such an opportunity slip away. Jane herself wasn't eager for the throne. She seemed to sense that a storm was about to break. And she was right. Her reign lasted only 9 days, followed by a fate far from what those who pushed her to the throne had envisioned. In her moment of need, Jane was betrayed by everyone. Noble, charming, surrounded by loved ones and friends, what more could she wish for? Jane Grey could have been one of the most fortunate princesses of her time. While others were married off to elderly kings or their own uncles under the pressure of dynastic politics, she was betrothed to a peer of her own age, a nobleman of good standing. Moreover, her relative, the young King Edward VI Tudor, held her in high regard. But all of this was merely surface level. The young resident of royal palaces was not truly happy. Jane was a direct descendant of the ruling royal line, Henry VII Tudor. Her grandmother was the beautiful Mary Tudor, who had been Queen of France before marrying the Duke of Suffolk. How Jane's childhood unfolded, and even the exact date of her birth, remain unknown. Some claim she was born in the same month as King Edward, but this is hard to prove. There are no documents left, and the house where Jane Grey grew up burned down in the 18th century. This family was simply plagued by misfortune. Due to her lineage, Jane was a true political asset. King Henry VIII had only one son and 2 daughters, whom he himself declared illegitimate. Thus, as a direct descendant of the Tudors, Jane represented incredible value. The throne was still far from her reach, but who could say? Therefore, Thomas Seymour, who held influence at court, proposed to Jane's family that they allow him to take her in for her upbringing. As a man with connections, he had a better chance of securing a favorable match for the heiress. Seymour even promised to facilitate Jane's marriage to King Edward VI. However, Seymour's reputation left much to be desired, and soon the Grey family demanded their daughter back. This proved difficult, and Jane herself resisted. The discipline at her father's house was strict, while her guardian offered her much more freedom. And yes, she had access to the court. Was it wise to turn that down? Yet, Jane had to return home. Seymour was arrested. Although she could still attend court festivities and had her own chambers in the royal residence, she spent most of her time with her parents. It was more of a had-to situation. There were no warm, trusting relationships among family members. Any minor infraction was met with harsh reprimands. Jane complained about her parents' coldness, and she began to withdraw into herself more often, finding solace in books, especially since her father's library was considered one of the best in England. She was educated and attractive, especially with such titles. Naturally, suitors began to come forward. Her parents chose Guilford Dudley for her, even though Jane's heart belonged to another. There's even a rumor of a secret engagement. Everything was happening in a rush. It was the mid-16th century, and King Edward VI was already ill. Just as the king's health was declining, Jane was married to Dudley. They hardly spent any time together. They barely got to know each other, let alone fall in love. Jane was worried about Edward and spent a lot of time at the palace. The weakening king made a will stating that Jane should rule after him, along with her descendants. The Dudley family suddenly found themselves elevated to an unreachable height, all thanks to the marriage. Or was it part of a previously devised plan? The king passed away a year later. Edward's older sister, Mary, the daughter of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon, needed to be arrested immediately, but she managed to escape. This was a total miscalculation. Mary quickly began gathering support, directed, of course, against Jane. When Jane learned of her new fate, she rejected it. She was offered the crown again, but she said no for the second time, and only then did she agree. To her own detriment, Mary was not idle. She launched an active campaign to seize power. Her supporters grew in number, especially after news spread that Jane's husband also intended to wear the crown. He had no claim to the throne. However, the Dudley family's popularity was not what Jane's family had imagined. It was no surprise that the Navy revolted, nor that even those who initially pledged loyalty to Jane later renounced it. Even her own family turned against her. In a short time, Jane was betrayed by everyone. A coup took place in London, and the Queen of England lost her power. She held it, nominally, for only 9 days, from the moment Jane accepted the crown. Then came the trial. The young queen, though she had not yet been crowned, was found guilty of treason. The same charges were brought against her husband and the Dudley family. They were led to the executioner's block one by one. First Guilford, then Jane. She was only about 17. Ahead of her lay a life full of joy and happiness. She could have become one of the most fortunate princesses, but Jane was betrayed by everyone.